I was sitting at the kitchen table this morning, same chair I've sat in for 43 years, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time my wife and I had looked at each other. Really looked. Not the glance when she asks if I want coffee. Not the nod when I say I'm going to the hardware store. I mean, looked at each other the way people do when they're trying to find something or say something without words. I'm 76 now. She's 74. We've been married for 51 years, and I don't think either of us has been happy in about 40 of them. I know how that sounds. I know what you're thinking. You're wondering why we stayed, why I stayed, and that's a fair question. It's the question my son asked me 2 years ago when his own marriage was falling apart. He was sitting right where I'm sitting now, and he said, "Dad, how did you do it? How did you and Mom make it work for so long?" And I lied to him. I told him it was about commitment, about showing up, about not running when things get hard. But the truth I didn't tell him is that I stayed because leaving felt harder than staying. And I think that's the thing I need to say out loud finally before I run out of time to say anything at all. My name is Robert. I grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, in a neighborhood where all the houses looked the same and all the fathers worked at the same factory, or the rail yard, or the mines. My father worked at the rail yard for 38 years, came home every night at 5:47, washed his hands at the kitchen sink, sat down to whatever my mother had made, read the paper, watched the news, and went to bed by 9. I don't remember them fighting. I don't remember them laughing much either. They just were. I met Susan in 1970. I was 21. She was 19. She worked at the Woolworths downtown behind the lunch counter. I came in for coffee one day after dropping off a job application at the bank, and she smiled at me in a way that made me feel like maybe I was the kind of person someone could smile at like that. We got married in 1973, small ceremony, her parents' backyard. I wore a suit I borrowed from my cousin. She wore her mother's dress, altered to fit. We honeymooned at Lake Wallenpaupack for 3 days, stayed in a cabin that smelled like mildew and old wood. It rained the whole time. I remember thinking, this is it. This is what the beginning of a life looks like. I got the job at the bank, started as a teller, worked my way up to branch manager over 18 years. Susan worked part-time at a dentist's office doing filing and appointment scheduling. We bought a house in 1975, 3-bedroom ranch, beige siding, small yard. It was in a development where every house looked almost identical, just like where I grew up. Our son Michael was born in 1977, our daughter Lauren in 1980, and somewhere in those years, maybe around 1979 or 1980, I started to notice that Susan and I didn't really talk anymore. Not about anything real. We talked about the kids, about what needed fixing in the house, about whether we should get a new car or keep the old one another year, about her mother's health, about my back pain. But we didn't talk about us. I don't know if we ever really had. Even when we were dating, our conversations were surface level. Movies we'd seen, places we wanted to go someday, what kind of house we'd live in, how many kids we'd have. We never talked about what scared us, what we wanted from life beyond the checklist, what we dreamed about when we couldn't sleep. I'm not sure we knew how. By 1985, we had a routine. I'd wake up at 6:15, shower, shave, dress. Susan would make coffee and toast. I'd eat standing up, reading the paper. She'd get the kids ready for school. I'd leave by 7:30, work until 5 o'clock, come home. Dinner was usually ready by 6 o'clock. We'd eat, mostly in silence unless the kids were talking. After dinner, she'd clean up. I'd watch TV or read in the den. The kids would do homework. By 9 o'clock, everyone was in their own space. By 10 o'clock, we'd go to bed. She'd read. I'd fall asleep. Weekends were yard work, errands, church on Sunday, maybe a visit to her parents or mine. It wasn't bad. It wasn't painful. It was just flat. I remember one night in 1987, I remember because it was the night of that big storm, the one that knocked out power for 2 days. We were sitting in the living room with candles lit and the kids were already asleep and it was quiet, just the wind outside and the sound of the candles flickering. And I thought, I should say something. I should ask her if she's happy. I should tell her I feel like we're roommates, not partners. But I didn't, because what if she said she felt the same way? What would we do then? We had 2 kids, a mortgage, car payments. Her mother was sick. My father had just retired. Everything was functional. It worked. Not well, maybe, but it worked. And I told myself that marriage wasn't supposed to be exciting after a while, that this was just what it looked like when you grew up, when you stopped being young and stupid and started being responsible. I told myself that love wasn't a feeling, it was a choice, a commitment, and I chose to stay. The 90s were more of the same. Michael graduated high school in 1995, went to Penn State. Lauren graduated in 1998, went to Temple. The house got quieter. Susan started working full-time again. at a different dentist's office closer to home. I got promoted to regional manager, which meant more travel, 2 or 3 nights a week, sometimes staying in hotels in Harrisburg or Allentown or Pittsburgh. I didn't mind the travel. If I'm being honest, I liked it. I liked the silence of the hotel room. I liked eating dinner alone at the bar, reading a book, not having to make conversation. Susan didn't seem to mind either. We'd talk on the phone when I was away, but it was always logistics. Did you pay the electric bill? The furnace is making that noise again. Michael called. He needs money for books. Never, I miss you. Never, I wish you were here. I had a friend at work, a guy named Paul, who got divorced in 1996. Messy divorce. His wife had been having an affair with a guy from her gym. Paul was devastated. Took him years to recover. He used to sit in my office some afternoons and just talk about how he didn't see it coming, about how he thought they were fine. And I remember thinking, at least they felt something. At least it mattered enough to hurt. Susan and I never fought. Not really. We'd have small disagreements about money, about the kids, about her mother moving in with us for a few months after her hip surgery, but nothing that ever escalated. Nothing that ever felt like it meant anything. We were polite. We were courteous. We were careful. And I think that was the problem. By the early 2000s, the kids were gone. Michael was married, living in New Jersey, working in finance. Lauren was in grad school in Boston. The house felt enormous. Every sound echoed. Susan started spending more time with her sister. They'd go to craft fairs, antique shops, weekend trips to the Poconos. I started playing golf on Saturdays with guys from work. We'd have dinner together most nights, but we'd eat in front of the TV. Jeopardy, Wheel of Fortune, the news. I retired in 2009. I was 60. Susan retired 2 years later. And suddenly we were just there, together, all the time. No work to go to, no kids to focus on, no excuses. I thought maybe it would get better. I thought maybe we'd finally have time to reconnect, to travel, to figure out who we were without all the noise. But we didn't know how. We'd sit in the living room, both reading, and hours would pass without a word. We'd go to the grocery store together and walk through the aisles in silence, putting things in the cart like we were on autopilot. I'd look at her sometimes and think, who are you? Do I even know you? And I think she was thinking the same thing about me. There was one moment in 2012 when I almost said something. We were at Lauren's wedding, beautiful ceremony, upstate New York, by a lake. During the reception, I watched Susan dancing with Michael, and she was laughing, really laughing, and I thought, I haven't heard her laugh like that in years. We were sitting at the table later, just the two of us, and I almost reached for her hand. I almost said we should talk, we should figure out what happened to us. But the DJ called for the father-daughter dance, and the moment passed, and I told myself, maybe it's too late. Maybe we're too far gone. Maybe it's better to just let it be. I had a heart attack in 2015. Not a massive one, but enough to scare me. I was in the hospital for 3 days. Susan came every day, sat in the chair by the bed, read her magazines. We didn't talk much. The doctor said I needed to reduce stress, exercise more, eat better. When I got home, Susan made changes, bought different groceries, started cooking healthier meals, reminded me to take my medication. She took care of me. But it didn't feel like love. It felt like duty. And I think that's when I realized this is it. This is all it's ever going to be. We're going to take care of each other. We're going to be kind and polite and functional. We're going to grow old in this house, in these routines. And one of us will die first and the other will keep going until they don't. And that will be our marriage. My friend Paul, the one who got divorced, he remarried in 2016. I went to the wedding, small ceremony, just family and close friends. And I watched him with his new wife Janet, and they were alive. They held hands. They whispered to each other and laughed. They looked at each other like they were still discovering things. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Envy. Not because I wanted someone else, but because I wanted to feel that, to know what it was like to be with someone and feel seen, heard, wanted. And I realized I had never had that with Susan. Not really. We'd been companions, co-parents, housemates, but we'd never been partners. And I could have left. I know that. Even at 67, I could have sat her down and said, this isn't working. This hasn't worked for a long time. Maybe we should try living separately. Maybe we should figure out what we actually want. But I didn't, because leaving meant lawyers and paperwork and telling the kids and selling the house and splitting everything we'd built. It meant admitting failure. It meant starting over at an age when I was tired, when I just wanted things to be easy, and staying was easier. It required nothing. Michael's marriage fell apart in 2022. He told me over the phone, voice shaking, that his wife had asked for a divorce, that they'd been going to counseling for a year and it wasn't helping, that they'd grown apart. And he asked me that question, "Dad, how did you and Mom make it work?" And I told him what I thought he needed to hear. But the truth is, we didn't make it work. We just didn't end it. And there's a difference. Susan's sister died last year. Cancer. It was fast. Susan was devastated. They'd been close their whole lives. She cried for weeks. And I held her a few times, let her lean against me while she sobbed. But even then, even in her grief, I felt like I was watching from a distance. I didn't know how to comfort her. I didn't know what to say. Because we'd spent 50 years not saying anything real. And you can't just flip a switch. I think about my father sometimes, about how he and my mother lived their whole lives in parallel, how they raised us and took care of the house and showed up to everything they were supposed to show up to. And I wonder if he ever felt this, if he ever lay in bed at night and thought, is this all there is? I'll never know. He died in 1998. He was 71. Heart attack. Same as almost got me. And I wonder what he would have done differently if he'd known he only had 71 years. I'm 76 now. Susan is 74. Statistically, we don't have much time left. And I think about all the things we never said to each other, all the conversations we never had, all the ways we stayed safe and small and separate. And I can't get it back. That's the thing about time. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. It doesn't pause while you figure things out. It just moves, steady and indifferent. And one day you wake up and realize you spent 50 years being comfortable instead of connected. And there's no do-over. I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me. I made my choices. I lived my life, and honestly, it wasn't a bad life. We raised 2 good kids. We had a roof over our heads. We were never hungry, never desperate, but I wasn't happy, and I don't think she was either. And we could have done something about it. We could have gone to counseling. We could have had hard conversations. We could have taken risks and been vulnerable and tried to find each other underneath all the years of silence. But we didn't, because it was easier not to, and now here we are. 2 people who share a house and a last name and a history, but not a life. Not really. If you're in something right now, a marriage, a relationship, a friendship, a job, a city, and you're staying because leaving feels too hard, or because you're scared of what comes next, or because you keep telling yourself it'll get better later, when things settle down, when you have more time, when the kids are older, when you retire, when things are less complicated, I want you to hear this. Later doesn't come. It just becomes never, and you can't get the years back. You can't go back to 30 and say the thing you didn't say. You can't go back to 40 and make the choice you were too afraid to make. You can't go back to 50 and start over. You just keep moving forward with whatever you chose. And if what you chose was safety over honesty, comfort over connection, ease over effort, you'll wake up one day and realize you built a life that looks fine from the outside, but feels empty from the inside. I don't hate Susan. I want to be clear about that. She's a good person. She did her best. We both did. But we were never right for each other. And we knew that. I think we knew that early on. But we were young and everyone was getting married and it seemed like the thing to do. And then there were kids and a mortgage and jobs and responsibilities. And it became easier to stay than to ask the hard questions, easier to be numb than to feel, easier to coast than to change. And now I'm 76, and this is my life. And I can't tell you it was worth it. I can tell you I survived. I can tell you I did what I was supposed to do. I can tell you I showed up. But I can't tell you I lived. Not the way I could have, not the way I should have. This morning, sitting at that kitchen table, I looked at Susan. She was reading something on her phone, drinking her coffee. The light was coming through the window, and for a second I could see the girl from the Woolworths counter, the one who smiled at me 43 years ago, and I thought, I'm sorry I didn't love you the way you deserved. I'm sorry I stayed when I should have been honest. I'm sorry we wasted so much time pretending this was enough, but I didn't say it out loud, because what would be the point? So I'm saying it to you instead. If you're staying somewhere because it's easier, because you're scared, because you keep thinking you'll deal with it later, don't wait as long as I did. Because one day, later becomes never. And you'll sit at a table you've sat at for 43 years, and you'll realize you can't remember the last time you felt anything. And there won't be enough time left to fix it. I don't know how much time I have left. Could be a year, could be 10. But I know this. I stayed because it was easier, and it cost me everything that mattered. Don't let easy rob you of real, because you don't get these years back. And they matter. Even when it doesn't feel like it, they matter.